Hello, my name is Greg Waugh. I'm with the South Atlantic Council staff, and I'm going to walk through our overview of Snapper Grouper Amendment 36. And this presentation will be put on our website as well. And when you look at it, you want to make sure you're looking at the one that says revised April 16, 2015. So first I want to cover some thanks to Dr. Will Heyman and Kyle McCain from LGL Ecological Research Associates. They did a lot of the cooperative research working with our fishermen and with MARMAP, and Will certainly also and Kyle helped with the presentations. And we had a number of cooperating fishermen who have participated in this. Also want to thank Dr. Marcel Reichert and the staff of MARMAP out of South Carolina MARMAP program. They worked up a lot of the samples that were collected, assisted with getting the permit to do this scientific sampling, and that's been a huge workload on them, and we certainly appreciate all their help. John Hunt with FWRI, they coordinated some of the sonic tagging work that I'll show, and he's made presentations and helped with some of the slides. Dr. Jerry Alt from the University of Miami Rosenstiel School, Rasmus, he did the larval modeling work that I'll be showing. And on our staff, Amber and Roger have helped with the presentation and outreach on Amber's part, and Roger has helped with the GIS and some of the analyses. So let's talk first about how did the council get here. The council has been interested in protecting spawning habitat and spawning fish, particularly really prime area. And we had closed fishing for deep water species deeper than 240 feet effective January 1, 2011. And due to the impacts and looking at some of the data on effectiveness of that, the council removed that closure effective May 10, 2012. And that was in large part targeted to protecting speckled hind and Warsaw grouper. And the NRDC and the Ocean Conservancy sued when we removed that closure. They sued on June 8, 2012. And the council has said that they would take, and the National Marine Fisheries Service argued in defending us in that lawsuit, that the council would take additional action. And the council indicated they would take that action regardless of how the judge ruled. And so that action is what we're talking about here in Snapper Grouper Amendment 36. We convened an MPA expert work group that had met a couple of times and produced a report that we're using. And in Coral Amendment 8 that has been approved, and we're waiting for the final rule to get approved, that includes 843 square miles of additional coral habitat area of particular concern. And due to the regulations that will be effective in those areas, that's assumed to be approximately 50% as effective as an MPA. And so even though the judge ruled in NOAA and council's favor, the council is still moving forward with this additional action. So the purpose is to identify important spawning habitat for snapper grouper species that can be designated for protection to enhance spawning and increase recruitment. We also want to reduce bycatch and bycatch mortality of snapper grouper species, including speckled hind and Warsaw grouper. And then we want to align the existing South Carolina MPA with the permitted site. And the need statement is there, tracks closely to the purpose. So first, just a little bit of background about what is a special management zone, or SMZ. This is a tool that was included in the original snapper grouper plan and has been used by the council since 1983. It addresses the use of certain gear on areas, but targets artificial reefs, fish attraction devices, and other modified areas of habitat used for the purpose of fishing. The intent of special management zones was to create the incentive to create artificial reef or fish attraction devices, increase biological protection, increase fishing opportunities that would not otherwise exist, and restrict certain types of gear not compatible with the intent of the SMZ. And we have imposed a number of regulations. I'm not going to go through these. You can look through this at your leisure. But we prohibited certain gear types beginning in 1987. And we've made several changes to that over the years. we've established SMZs off of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. The state of North Carolina has never requested one. They manage their areas on their own. And finally, last time we addressed the SMZs is in Amendment 23 in 2011, where we limited the harvest of snapper, grouper, and coastal migratory pelagics to the bag limits in SMZs off of South Carolina. So that's how we've handled SMZs thus far. So how do we connect now the spawning areas to the use of SMZs? So for spawning sites, that's where you get groups of fish at above normal densities for reproduction, and most groupers and snappers migrate to specific areas at specific times to reproduce, and this is linked to the lunar cycle. And we've got some examples of this in Riley's Hump, and you'll see me talking about Riley's Hump some, and then about more recent research off of the Georgetown hole, Devil's Hole, off of South Carolina. So there's examples in Riley's Hump where you have multi-species spawning sites. Here you've got a picture of muttons and triggerfish spawning roughly at the same time. And then when you study an area like Riley's Hump, it's been studied for a number of years now, and you're finding these special areas are important to a number of different species. For instance, the area shown here for mutton snapper, that's important. That's where mutton snapper is spawning. And then you've got another area over here where at other times you get cubera snapper and then black and scamp grouper spawning. So these are very special areas, and what we want to do is look for these areas and protect them in the South Atlantic. So here's some sonic tagging work that was done at Riley's Hump. This is tracking fish from this one protected area as they move to another protected area where they're spawning, and this is linked to the lunar cycle. So they go down to the Tortugas reserve area. They stay there, reproduce, and then when they finish spawning for that month, they move back up into the other protected area. And for mutton snapper, this was observed in May, June, and July. And so it really shows the importance of protecting these different areas. And you can see that where they're hanging out before spawning is protected, and then where they're spawning is protected. And then as you study these areas more, you can find areas where you have what's called a spawning corridor, where these fish are moving through these areas to reproduce, and they're allowed to be fished in here, and so that may be an issue that needs to be addressed in the future. And we also want to look, again, this is Riley's Hump, watching what happens based on modeling work that was done looking at larval transport in February of 2009, and this shows Tortugas down here released these little data buoys and followed where they went. And you can see with the currents prevailing at that time, they move around the tip of Florida, up the Florida East Coast, and they get caught up in these little eddies and so forth. So this is very encouraging. And as far as mutton is concerned, starting to hear from our fishermen that they're seeing more mutton snapper on the Florida East Coast. So as we protect areas in the South Atlantic, this is showing, just based on the current work that we know now, that some of these larvae are going to be retained in the area and settle out and grow. So now let's move. We talked about Riley's Hump. Let's move now to right off of South Carolina. We're in the Georgetown Hole, or Devil's Hole as it's known. Dr. Will Heyman had some funding research, and we contributed some of our council money for him to work with cooperating fishermen. And this is Georgetown Hole right here. And these various dots and colors indicate where he collected fish in reproductive condition. They were worked up by Marmat to confirm that. And so you can see, again, this area is similar to Riley's Hump in that you've got a number of different species: blue line tilefish, gag, greater amberjack, mutton snapper, scamp, snowy grouper, Warsaw grouper, yellow edge grouper, using different parts of this area, again showing how important this area is for a number of different species. And the Council over the years has been especially concerned about Warsaw grouper and speckled hind, and we've got some data collected showing that those fish are indeed in spawning condition in this area of the Georgetown Hole or Devil's Hole. So in terms of the next step, how does the Council move forward with consideration of spawning SMZs? We held a number of scoping meetings in August 2014 from North Carolina through Florida, and we're doing round one of our public hearings now in April, and I'll be talking in a few moments about where those hearings are taking place. But the approach is to specify a process for identifying spawning sites for snapper grouper species, including speckled hind and Warsaw grouper, based on the characteristics of sites important for spawning, that being bottom topography, current systems, and so forth. And we want to study these areas, refine our knowledge of these areas as well. And some things to note about this new approach is the current SMZ procedure, spawning special management zone procedure, needs to be expanded to provide for spawning SMCs to target natural habitat. And we address that in actions 1 and 2. Want to make it very clear that we are only prohibiting fishing and or possession for snapper grouper species. So fishing for other species would be allowed. Things like billfish, king mackerel, Spanish mackerel, cobia, those types of things, tunas, would be allowed. The spawning SMZ approach would not make any changes to existing deep water MPAs or SMZs other than we're shifting one MPA off of South Carolina, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So let's go through the actions now, and I'll also point out where our snapper group advisory panel, they met and looked at that, at this amendment, and they offered some input as well. So action 1 looks at modifying the special management zone procedure, and the Council's preferred alternative is to modify the SMZ procedure to include protection of natural bottom important for spawning by designating spawning SMZs. So that will allow us to address this in the SMZ process. And then how we do changes in the future is addressed in action 2. This would modify, the Council's preferred alternative is to modify the framework for the snapper grouper FMP to include modifying or establishing new spawning SMZs. And the framework is a way of doing things a little more quickly than a full plan amendment. It would still allow plenty of opportunity for public input over at least 2 meetings. And the Council's preferred alternative is 2. Alternative 3 would use the framework to modify areas, but if you wanted to establish new spawning SMZs, you'd have to do a full plan amendment. And some considerations and suggestions for these spawning SMZs is the Council has chosen some sample sites to give the public an idea of what the Council is considering in terms of areas of approximate size. And I'll cover these in actions 3, 4, 5, and 6 for areas off of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. So the Council wants your input on sites and areas and size of areas. You're not limited to what we have here. Again, these are just some sample sites. The Council is also going to use artificial reefs to improve habitat and consider these when existing MPAs, and that indeed is why we're moving the one boundary of an MPA in Action 7. And the Council is going to allow transit through the spawning SMZs with gear stowed, but we're prohibiting anchoring, and that will be addressed in Action 8. Enforcement, monitoring, and evaluation will be covered in a system management plan, and I've got a couple of slides to address that. So let's start in North Carolina, and we'll work south. And there's a lot of information on here, but some of this was at the request of our snapper grouper advisory panel that we add this. And I'll go over this in detail for this first North Carolina site, and then for other slides just point it out to you. So we've got a large chart in the public hearing document that shows the general area, and then a more detailed chart that shows these areas in a little more detail. So the first one is the Malchase wreck, and we've got 2 alternatives. Alternative 2A is 2.47 square miles. Alternative 2B is 1 square mile. And 1 square mile is equal to 640 acres. And so that helps to give a comparison if you're more familiar with acres. And in terms of where these are, that's Cape Lookout, but the northernmost boundary of alternative 2A, here's the latitude and longitude for it, and the southern boundary, here's the latitude for it. And then the other area up here we're looking at is the 780 bottom, and we've got 3 alternatives ranging from 3A at 12 square miles to 3C at 3 square miles. And again, the latitude of the northernmost area and the southernmost area for the 780 is shown there, so you can look on your own charts and see where this is. Our snapper grouper AP approved motion supporting 2B and 3C, and also looking at an area north of the 780 bottom up in this area here, looking at that as an alternative to this 780 bottom. There was some feeling that the 780 bottom is used a little more, and so if we went up here just north of it, there may not be as much resistance and as many impacts to the area. Off of South Carolina, we're looking at the area known as Georgetown Hole or Devil's Hole, and we've got 3 alternatives here ranging in size from 1 to 13.5 square miles, and the northernmost latitude is shown here, and the southernmost latitude is shown here, so you can locate it. Our snapper grouper AP supports the Georgetown Hole, but no larger than 3.1 square miles, and I've got a chart that shows that. And they also support what's known as areas 51 and 53. These are not shown on the chart because these are artificial reefs that were created for the specific purpose of making them protected areas. Each of those is 2.98 square miles. The AP also approved a motion to expand the northern South Carolina MPA roughly up in here. You can see that on the larger chart. Expand that to the south into the offshore area as an alternative to the Georgetown Hole. So here's a little more detail of the Georgetown Hole. The white box is the 1 square mile. Here's the 3.1 square mile box that was proposed by the AP. And then we've got a scientist, Dr. Will Heyman, that's done a lot of the research. He suggested refining the larger area to a box shaped like this to capture this area of observations out here, and this larger area is 13.8 square miles. Then moving down to Georgia, in the northern part of Georgia, we have a Georgia MPA that's in existence here. So we're looking at adding to that on the eastern side, nearer to shore. And we've got alternatives ranging from 2A through 2C. 18 square miles is a smaller one, 71.5. And again, we've got the northernmost latitude, the southernmost latitude shown here. And the AP supported 2C, which is 18 square miles, and they recommended reducing the size of the existing Georgia MPA by 18 miles to offset any likely impacts. And I should have mentioned on all of these boxes too, we show the depth on the inshore part of the MPA and the depth on the offshore side of the MPA, the spawning SMZ, as well as the distance from some prominent location on shore. This will help orient you as to where this is located. Then the southern part of Georgia, we've got alternatives for an area known as St. Simons, and you can see the observations of spawning fish in here. These alternatives range from 9.4 to 23.5 square miles, and again, the northernmost latitude, southernmost latitude. Our advisory panel supports consideration of all of these alternatives, as well as one a little smaller than 3C. And there was also some consideration to look at an area that's between 25 and 35 miles east of St. Simons, and the latitude and longitude are going to be provided there. These existing boxes are about 76 to 78 miles offshore. And then the Florida northern area is in a location known as Daytona Steeples. Again, the northernmost and southernmost latitude are shown here. The size ranges from 6 to 27 square miles, and the advisory panel, or Snapper Group advisory panel, supported 3C, the 6 square miles. And the last location is off west of Key West, in an area known as the Warsaw Hole, where in years past there were lots of Warsaw grouper in that area based on information from the fishermen. And we've got two alternatives, 2 square mile and 1 square mile, and the advisory panel supports alternative 2A at 2 square miles in northern latitude, southern latitude. So that's it for sites. And again, don't feel limited to those. If you feel there are other areas that you know that are better, then give us that information. So Action 7 would move the existing Charleston Deep Artificial Reef MPA 1.4 miles to the northwest to match the boundary of the permitted site. So this original area was the original MPA. In citing some material due to weather and currents, that those materials landed on the border and just outside. So the state of South Carolina got a change to their permit from the Corps of Engineers, and to be this new area there, the corner latitude and longitudes. And so what the council is doing is just shifting that box 1.4 miles to the northwest, keeping it the same size, and our advisory panel supported that. Action 8 would establish transit and anchoring provisions, and our AP support the transit provision and the anchoring prohibition. And this wording, I'm not going to go through this in detail. You have it in the presentation and in your public hearing document. This wording was taken from the regulations and modified to address spawning SMZs. And so look this over. The council has directed us to try to make our transit provisions for all of our protected areas as consistent as we can. So we'd appreciate any suggestions you have on this. So that's it for the actions, and there's a lot of concern over how we're going to enforce this and monitor it and evaluate it. And the council is working on a system management plan that will specify the details of how this is done. It'll address research and monitoring using citizen science and traditional fishery independent surveys. The council is developing a citizen science program in cooperation with the National Marine Fisheries Service and the states in our area, and we hope to use that to encourage more research. Outreach, our council staff will take the lead on this, and we have some details to share with you about that. Enforcement, we're going to use the citizen science involvement, explore the use of satellites, and then, as we do with our other fishing regulations, the National Marine Fisheries Service, Coast Guard, and state law enforcement officers. And then administrative and financial, we'll talk about how much each of these projects cost, and then we'll try and obtain funding to do these. So we've got some goals and objectives laid out, biophysical goals and objectives, socioeconomic, governance, and I'm not going to go into these in detail. You have them. Any input you have will be greatly appreciated. We'll have a draft of this plan ready for the June council meeting. Using outreach as an example, I wanted to give a little more detail. The top priorities for implementation. The first one is to work with fishing chart manufacturers, both printed and electronic, and our vendors to improve available information for the deep water Type 2 MPAs and our spawning SMZs. And you can see what some of the others are. So each of these will have specifics laid out for what we are going to accomplish. And this will ensure that we address research and monitoring, outreach, law enforcement, and then evaluation. So we know that these areas are working and we demonstrate, and success to us means we're documenting spawning in these areas, working with the fishermen. The fishermen will see this. If we find an area that's not working, then we'll remove the SMZ designation. So in terms of timing for this amendment, in September of 2014, the Council will be reviewed scoping comments. December 2014, the Council reviewed the amendment, provided guidance. September through February 2015, the Council staff and IPT have been working on the document. You have a draft public hearing document. At our March meeting in 2015, the Council reviewed the amendment and approved for public hearings. So this April round of public hearings via webinar and comment stations, our first round of public hearing. The Council will look at all of your comments, and I'll give you information on how to submit written comments in a few minutes. On June 2015, during their meeting, they'll review the comments. Then they will select sites for more detailed analysis and to approve to go out for a second round of public hearings. And we'll conduct those public hearings in August. And then in September 2015, the Council will review the public input and approve the actions. And in all likelihood, we will look at the final document in December and submit it for formal review in December. And that will have implementation, I'm sorry, that's off the bottom of the screen here, sometime around the middle of the year, July 1, 2016 is what we're shooting for. Excuse me. So what can you do? Submit written comments by 5 p.m. May 1st. You can mail those to Bob Mahood at the Council office. You can email them to mike.collins at safmc.net. Please put Snapper Grouper Amendment 36 in the subject line. You can also fax your comments in 843-769-4520. We have additional information available on our website. And we lay out here the public hearing comment stations starting April 20th in South Carolina. We've got 2 locations in South Carolina. On April 20th, the 21st off of North Carolina. The 22nd, we've got 2 locations in Georgia. And then the 23rd, Daytona Beach. And then we will be in Key West in June, and we'll take public comment in June. And we've tried to locate these in areas closest to the sample sites that are under consideration for designation as spawning SMZs. If you need any more information, you want to get involved in the process, if you have Amendment 36 questions, you can contact me. We're out doing these meetings, so really email would be best. If you've got general questions, you can contact Amber Von Harten or Kim Iverson. And I want to thank you for looking at this video, encourage you to take a look at the public hearing material so that when we hold these public hearing webinars, you'll be prepared. And how we're going to do that is I'll give this presentation, and then we will answer any questions that you might have, and then each of you will be given an opportunity to offer your official comments. And we will have a chair at each of these locations. You'll sit down and your comments will be recorded. And we will transcribe those, and each council member will get all that material in the briefing book. So thanks again for taking the time to look at this, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.